This video is sponsored by Woodworkers Guild of America. Oops, I did it again. I can't seem to stop myself from buying these pieces off Marketplace that have an odor. Now, I did ask if there was a smell to this and they said no, but when I got there, it was clear this had been left outside on a porch for quite some time. It smelled really bad, really musty, and the guy was like 80 years old and I just felt bad. It was free, it's not like I paid for it, so I ended up taking it, and here's what we're working with. This is a pretty typical looking, I would say 30s to 50s, somewhere in there, probably 40s, 3-drawer chest of drawers. Clearly there are a ton of finish issues. We've got chipped and missing veneer, torn veneer, there's areas where it is actually split. There is a ton of water damage and staining on both the top and the front. It was these original solid wood and brass handles as well as the burled veneer on the front that really pulled me into this piece, and I was able to just see this refinished. Or maybe it's just wishful thinking, I'm not sure yet. So we have veneer patches to make, veneer repairs. Obviously the entire finish has to come off. Almost certainly an oxalic acid treatment on the top. I'm super happy that all 6 handles are there. That's really good news. But yeah, the biggest issue with this, believe it or not, is not the finish, it is the odor. It's gonna take some time to take this apart, clean it all, and see if I can mitigate that and then move forward. Stay tuned. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. Okay, so you've seen the outside, let's have a look at the inside. It's better than expected. The drawers themselves are in decent shape, but they smell, and my face says it all right there. As soon as I open that drawer, I get a big whiff of that mildew smell. Now, people like to harp on me all the time about how much I talk about smells. I'm very sensitive to certain smells, and then other smells I can't smell at all. Because I sell these pieces, I have to take care of any odors, and people get mad when I complain about cigarette smell, or, they say old furniture is supposed to smell. No, it's not. Nobody wants to buy a dresser that stinks. They're not going to want to put their clothes in it. It's just not going to happen. So odor is just a part of refinishing furniture, just like damage to veneer, just like finish damage. It's just part of the process, people. So to tackle an odor that you can't physically see, like if you don't physically see mold but you smell it, or mildew, whatever, you really have to take everything apart, clean it, and then treat every square inch. So to do so, I'm removing the top. I had to flip this upside down so I could see better. And unfortunately, the back row of screws were at an angle from the back, which means that they attached the top before they put the back panel on, so I have to remove the back panel. But that's something that I would have done anyway because I need to clean this, sand it, and reseal it if I'm even able to keep it. These back panels, for some reason, are where a lot of these smells tend to linger. So sometimes you can make a piece smell so much better even just by replacing that back panel. But pulling that off, now I can have a pretty good look at the inside, how everything is constructed. I'm not seeing anything that stands out in terms of areas of mold. There's a few spots where there's clearly water damage. And then I found this. Now this would have been some sort of wood-boring insect or worm. Don't panic. This is not uncommon at all in old furniture, but you need to make sure if you see something like this that it's not still active. This board, because of where it is going to have to be replaced because it's compromised now. These creatures just decimate the wood inside and tend to make it not stable. So I'm just kind of picking through here and I'm looking for eggs. I'm looking for actual bugs or worms or areas of fresh sawdust which would indicate the presence of those things. I'm not seeing any of that even once I got down quite a bit further. So safe to say that this infestation is old. It might have even been there when they built it. But there's nothing active currently going on, so I'm safe in this area at least. This was the only spot on the entire chest of drawers where I saw this sort of damage. So, I mean, Really, I could have left this in place, but that's not me. You guys know that. So I'm going to cut this out. I'm doing it in a couple sections just so I don't tear off that middle bar there. But these are just put in place with some tenons on either side. It's going to be a bit of a bugger to get the new piece back in, but I'm going to do what I can. I'm just leaving that part attached. I'm going to take that off separately. And this is just held in with a tiny bit of wood glue and a single nail, so I'm just pulling it out. So to replace that board I just took out, it's not going to be too hard. I have to find a piece of hardwood the right length and width and depth. I need to cut a groove in it so that that drawer guide can slide in, and then we've got these tenons on either end. Normally I would cut those with a saw like this, but there's other ways to do it, and I'm always trying to expand my skills and, I guess, toolkit or different ways of doing things. I do know that you can do the same thing on a bandsaw, but I, as always, have to research the heck out of everything, which leads me to the sponsor of today's video, Woodworkers Guild of America, who I'm so happy to have run into. Woodworkers Guild of America is an online resource for all things woodworking. You've got instructions, ideas to motivate you and inspire you, tons of information, and they teach you through instructional videos taught by super talented people. I've found every class that I've watched so far really easy to follow. They will walk you through every technique with step-by-step demonstrations, and they're always coming out with new premium videos. I watched this video by George Vondriska on how to cut these with a bandsaw, and that's the method I'm choosing to replace that board. As a member, you will have access to their entire catalog, their live streaming tutorials and Q&As, where their expert instructors share their tips and answer questions and engage with you in real time. If this is something that interests you, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the video description below will get a full year of premium membership to Woodworkers Guild of America for only $1.49. If you're like me and have found woodworking a little intimidating to get started in, something like that is a great way to dip your feet in, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Alright, so now that I have the top off, I can start cleaning this piece. I'm first going to vacuum any dust or cobwebs. This also gives me a chance to find any other things that need repairs, such as this spot here, and this spot. This one will be repaired once I replace that board. But the next step is the most important. That's literally cleaning with either a degreaser. I'm using vinegar. I find it great for smells, and this is the perfect day to do it. It's hot out, but it's also windy, which means it's going to dry fast. So this is actually a double strength cleaning vinegar mixed with some water. I have a scrub brush and I have a little scrub pad, and I'm just trying to remove as much of the surface dirt as I can. Decided yet if I want to sand down the drawers. Now normally I do, actually almost every single piece I do, but the interior is actually in pretty good shape for the most part. It's going to depend how this part comes out and if I can get any remaining odor out. Obviously the fronts are going to have to be refinished for sure, and this is a pretty good idea of what that walnut's going to look like. It's hard to tell here, but there's so much dirt coming off of this. It's unbelievable. You can kind of see in quick little glimpses there on the paper towel just how dirty that front is. So now I am just going to let this bake in the sun and empty out the water bucket, which was absolutely gross. Again, I'm not sure yet if I'm going to have to replace this back panel. It'll depend if I can get all of the smell out. It's already been cleaned. I'm going to lightly sand both sides. I'm going to take it outside, and this, along with the drawers and the carcass that I just did, I'm going to cover with Concrobian mold control. If there are any active spores anywhere on this piece, this should do the trick. I'm going to leave that outside until the evening and bring it in. It should be completely dry by then. In the meantime though, I'm going to get to work on these handles. There's not a ton of finish left on them, so I'm just using a couple of scrapers here to just remove that old finish. And then I'll be using some Barkeeper's Friend to polish up the brass inlays. I'm going to be taping these off so that I don't get any of the Barkeeper's Friend on it. I could have done this in reverse and polished the brass first and then removed the finish, but I didn't, so I'm taping it. I can pull the tape off now and have a look. The wood looks light right now, but as soon as I go to put a top coat on it, it's going to go super dark. So you're going to have an amazing contrast here. This cleaned up super nice. I'm really happy. So on to the next 5. It is the next day now, and this has been vacuumed. It's been cleaned with vinegar. It's been left in the sun for almost an entire day. Very hot sun. And it had a treatment of mold spray. There is still a faint odor, but it is leaps and bounds better than it was. So now I can move on to sanding the carcass here. I'm going to be sanding inside and out. Basically everything you see is going to get sanded and then sealed. So one side here you saw in the beginning had some splits. Now let me explain these. These splits are not moving and they are only showing up on the outside. The inside, this is all one solid panel. So multiple strips of wood glued together. You can't see the cracks on the inside, only the outside. And the joints themselves between the boards are perfect. So what this means is this is a stable crack. I can't take this apart and re-glue it and clamp it back together because it's already together, if that makes sense. When wood dries, it can do weird things, and sometimes it will dry in one direction and not another, and that's what's happening here. So I have 2 options. I can either fill it with a wood filler or I can splice new wood in. These cracks aren't big enough to splice even a really thin piece of wood in, so I'm going to be using a non-shrinking wood filler. This is a best case scenario for me. If these joints were completely separated or were moving, I would have to do a full repair. But first, I'm going to sand this all right up to the grit just before my last grit. Using one of SurfPrep's foam pads here to go around this fluted area so that I don't remove any of the profile while I'm sanding, and it's going to go a lot faster than hand sanding the entire thing. Now this is an amazing example of the power of dust collection when you're sanding. Because this isn't flat against the surface, it's kicking up dust, as you can see. But look here as it sucks it right back in to the sander and then down the vacuum hose. Adding dust collection to my sanding setup was the best investment. Not just for keeping things clean, but also for my health, because that's way less dust actually in the air. And I just have one of my nearly spent sanding pads here, fold it in half to get right down into that groove. So when you're using a wood filler, you need to know what the wood's going to look like with a clear coat, and you can see it's much darker when it's wet. So I'm going with a slightly darker wood filler. I'm going to be using red oak, even though this is not oak. to fill these cracks. Now, what's kind of funny about this oak thing and me saying that this is not oak, I did a little contest on Instagram to see if anyone could identify this wood. It's not something I run into a lot, but that's because I do a lot of sort of mid-century furniture, and this wasn't that common in mid-century furniture. It came more so beforehand. It's very close to walnut. It's actually in the walnut family. If you have any guesses, let me know below, but I will mention later in the video what type of wood this actually is. Yeah, the sides of this piece are a little rough in spots, so I'm using the pencil trick here to make sure I'm sanding it all flat. If there's any little divots, you'll still see pencil after putting the sander over it, and this trick helps get nice smooth results when sanding. The entire inside of this is going to be sealed with an odor killing primer. It's clear, it's a spray. You can get it in brush or roll on, but spray sometimes is a little easier to get in those nooks and crannies. So I'm just giving this a very light sanding inside just to kind of clean it up, and then I'll be adding some of that primer. I'll be fixing this part here in a little bit, but for now I'm just spraying right into those grooves. Literally every surface on the inside of this piece is gonna get sprayed. You can also use shellac for this exact same purpose. It's a great odor blocker. Into the planer goes my piece of ash that I'm going to be using to recreate that broken rail. I'm going to be using some hide glue for this. It is what the majority of the piece is constructed with. But the tricky part here is going to be getting that piece in. So I'm flipping my clamps around to make a spreader rather than a clamp. And I'm hoping that I can spread this just enough that nothing breaks, but that I can tap that piece in. And that seems to have done the trick. Now I can clamp that up and let it dry and make those other repairs to the drawer guides. This is the underside of the top. The underside is a veneer. There's walnut veneer on the opposite side on the very top. But the wood in between, I'm not sure what it is. While I'm repairing these splits in the veneer here, I'm kind of pondering what I want to do with that trim around the top. Normally in Art Deco style pieces, I love, especially if the drawers are walnut, I love doing a dark brown trim, and it just makes the walnut stand right out. Usually those fluted details are some nondescript wood like poplar or sometimes maple, and I don't mind staining them. The fluted edges on the bottom of this piece are actually the same as the sides of the piece, and it is time now for me to tell you what kind of wood this is. Obviously we have walnut veneer on the top and walnut burl on the drawer faces. The rest of the entire cabinet is made of butternut. And butternut, like I said, is part of the walnut family. Sometimes they call it white walnut. It feels like walnut when you're sanding it, but it's actually a lot softer. Butternut was often used for carving. The point of me telling you all this is that because butternut is such a nice wood in itself, and I don't run into it all that often, I don't really want to stain it super dark. So in this case, I think what I'm going to do the opposite of what I normally do. The walnut parts will naturally be dark because it's walnut, but I think I'm going to leave the butternut natural or as very close to natural as possible. So you're going to have contrast in the opposite direction that I normally do. I'm going to give you a heads up. I don't really like that look. I much prefer the trim a lot darker than the drawers, but anyway, we're going to see how this turns out. Just a friendly reminder that if you like this sort of content, I try to put out a few videos a month. Comment and let me know what you think of my work. And if you're subscribed, don't forget to hit that notification bell. I often get people not realizing that I'm constantly putting out new work, so hitting that bell will make sure you get notified every time I post a video. So as you can see, I just did an oxalic acid treatment on the top. What that's going to do is hopefully kind of dissolve some of these organic stains. There was a big black stain kind of in a square or rectangle shape. That came off quite a bit with the first treatment, but I ended up doing 3 treatments altogether to try to get this as close to normal as possible. I wasn't able to get every little mark out, but I did what I could. A couple of these drawers had some splits. These drawers are oak, solid oak, not a plywood for once. So to fix this, I just pried up one edge and put some actual wood glue in. I'm not using hide glue here because this is a joint that I want to be permanent. Hide glue is easily reversible, so I kind of prefer that in joints most of the time. But if I'm trying to glue 2 pieces of wood together to make a strong bond, I'll use actual wood glue. So much like the entire inside of the cabinet that was getting sprayed with that odor blocking primer, I'm doing the same thing on the drawers. I'm sanding every surface inside and out, front, back. And when it comes to the burl here, I'm just doing a very light sanding. This is a 150 grit, just to kind of smooth things out, and then I'll go in with a 180 grit and smooth things a little bit more. Obviously this walnut is veneer, so you don't want to go in with a super heavy grit. Now, as far as the butternut goes, it's a super light wood, and we've got some areas that are a lot lighter than others, so I want to kind of tone down that contrast a bit. So I'm going to be using a dye stain, and I'm trying a couple different colors here. I absolutely hated this first color. It just was a little bit too green. And this board is actually a piece of butternut. It's that board that I replaced, so I just sanded a piece off so I could test it. And yeah, I am not loving that slight green tint. This is dark walnut, which is very dark, too dark. So that's a no-go. And the third aniline dye stain I tried is a color that you would normally use on maple. And it actually worked out to be perfect. It gave me that sort of warm brown look. And that's a bit closer to what I'm going for. Again, I'm so used to doing these trim pieces in dark, so going light here is really out of my comfort zone. I also used the same dye stain to do the drawer boxes. I had sanded them down, like I said, used some dye stain, and then I'll seal them with that odor blocking primer. So now it's time to use this on the actual butternut. This is going to look quite dark at first, but what's nice about the dye stain when you first apply it, it's going to give you a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like with a clear coat afterwards. So you can see this wood is absolutely beautiful. And this side has a lot more of the dark streaks than the other side. The other side has one sort of dark streak and the rest is all light. So that's why I'm opting to use the dye stain here. I use a lot of different finishes on my furniture. I use lacquer, shellac, sometimes polyurethane, but not that often. But Odie's is one of my absolute favorites. I use it the most, and I never get tired of watching it transform wood into the work of art that it actually is. So once the initial coat is applied, I am actually going in with a 2000 grit soft pad and kind of burnishing it with the oil. Then I'm going to let that sit on there for about an hour or so and buff it off completely. So we're moving on to the top now. I did use a little bit of the dye stain on the top just because the top was so sun bleached that it was just incredibly light. Now there was this little area here that was a blemish initially that didn't quite come out. I can't expect this top to be perfect. It was in such rough shape. It's gonna bug me, but it kind of is what it is. So you can see here that I've done the trim here dark. Now, why did I do the trim here dark but not the bottom? And my reasoning is I didn't like the wood that was in between. It was too yellow. And my thought was that it might kind of help tie the top into the drawers. That top drawer, which is a walnut burl, is quite dark compared to the lower drawers. So, you know, it's an executive decision. I'm not 100% sure I like it, but then again, I don't really like this top. It's just weird for this piece. I used some water-based dark walnut stain here on that back panel that was pretty rough looking and reattached it. You can actually see there's two sets of holes here. So this piece did have a mirror at one point that sat right in the middle. So Andrea's popping in to help me here. I was really pressed for time with getting this video out on time. So she came in to help me with the last minute details here, scrubbing off the rest of the tarnish from the brass inlays on the handles. And Freya and Nacho are supervising, I guess we'll call it. Looking back at what I started with, I have to say that I am happy overall with how this turned out. I had some executive decisions to make regarding the top. I still don't know if I should have done that little lip there in a dark stain. I was trying to pull in the dark from the top drawer, but whether I succeeded in that or not definitely is in the eye of the beholder. Andrea and I both find this top a little strange for this piece. I think a flat top would have looked so much better, especially if it was in that butternut wood. Love, love, love how the handles came out. I'm so glad that I had all 6 and they were in good shape. This piece was so smelly that I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to turn it around, but I'm happy to say that the smell is gone, or at least 99% of it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and let me know below what you think of this piece. Enjoy the reveal, and I will see you next time.